All right, now that we've talked about culture and geography, it's time to start talking about some actual history. We're going to start talking today about human origins, going back to the beginning of man. The first humans are known as hominids, and hominids are essentially humans or any other human-like creature that has the ability to walk upright. That is, they're no longer walking on all fours or using their arms for stability in any way. Some of the oldest hominids are found in Africa, specifically the Great Rift Valley in Eastern Africa. These hominids that had the ability to walk upright were very useful. So what I want you to do right now is take a second, maybe pause it, and jot down some ways that you think that a hominid's ability to walk upright would be useful to them. Some of the things that could be useful in walking upright could include things like being able to spot threats easier because you're taller, using your arms, which are now free to use weapons, tools, to carry food, to carry children, and to do things like make shelters, make fire, to draw cave art, and so on. But do you know another important human development? This other development probably is not one that most people think of, but it's something that you use every day. It is the thumb. For those of you who are video gamers and texters, you couldn't do this without your thumb. So why is it important? Opposable thumbs are really, really important because it allows us to do things that early hominids could not do. Think about trying to write if your hand had like a piece of tape around it so your thumb could not move. That's essentially what early hominids' hands looked like. But with the opposable thumb, there's more dexterity. You can use that pincher sort of grasp to pick up small things, to write, to use tools, to hold things. This is really important in our human development. So how do we know what we know about these early humans? Because they didn't have written records. So how do we know about them? What we know about them comes from archaeologists and anthropologists. That is, people who study the remains of these prehistoric people. Mary and Louis Leakey are examples of archaeologists. They were working in a place called Tanzania where they found what looked like human-like footprints preserved in volcanic ash. What had happened was some kind of hominid had walked through like a mucky ash that had been mixed with water and had left footprints. Those footprints became preserved, and that's what Mary and Louis Leakey found. We also know, because of things like Lucy. Lucy is what we have left of an early hominid. She is the oldest almost complete female skeleton ever found. They estimate her age to be at about 3.5 million years. And she was found in a place called Ethiopia. Again, Tanzania, Ethiopia, all of these are near the Great Rift Valley. She was named after a song that was playing when they found her called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. And from people like Louis Leakey and from what we know from archaeologists and from artifacts like Lucy is that over the millions of years, hominids developed. Let's look at the hominids in order of their development. Starting first with the Australopithecines. They were around from about 4 million to about 1 million BCE. Remember, BCE runs backwards. Then we have Homo habilis. Homo habilis means man of skill. And this group was around from about 2.5 million to about 1.5 million BCE. These are the group that started to use very basic tools, digging sticks, stones to cut, things like that. This is also the footprints that the Leakeys found in Olduvai Gorge in Tanzania. Notice that with both the Australopithecines and Homo habilis, their skulls are very much ape-like. They have very pronounced jaws. They have flat noses. Brow ridges, that is the area above the eyes where the eyebrows would be, stands out quite a bit, and there isn't a lot of room for a large brain. Then you have Homo erectus. Homo erectus means upright man. They started to use more sophisticated tools. They were also the first to move out of Africa, the first to use fire, and the first to use language. They were around from about 1.6 million to around 30,000 BCE. Again, look at the skull. It's starting to become more human-like. The brow ridge is going down, the jaw is less pronounced, and there's more room for a brain. Then you have the Neanderthals. This is your typical caveman. Heavy brow, well-defined muscles, thick bones. These were the ones that lived in caves, especially during the winter months. We have evidence that they had some kind of religious beliefs because they buried their dead in a very ritualistic way. They mysteriously vanished, though. They were alive around 200,000 to about 30,000 BCE, around the same time as Homo erectus and the next group, the Cro-Magnon man. And they mysteriously vanished. We don't know if there was some kind of issue health-wise, or if other more advanced species like the Cro-Magnon man or Homo sapiens came in and actually forced them to go extinct, but either way, they mysteriously vanished. Then we have Homo sapiens, that is modern men. Homo sapiens translates into wise men because they have large brains. The larger brains allowed them to use more hunting tactics and to use better tools, which is one of the reasons why people believe that these more modern type of humans may have caused the Neanderthals to go extinct. They were around from about 40,000 to 8,000 BCE. So where did they go? We said that a lot of the oldest artifacts that we have found is in Africa. So we believe that that's where they started. You notice the red are Homo sapiens, the sort of yellowish color are Neanderthals, and the green are other species. We believe that they started out in Africa and then migrated north into Europe. Some made it over into Europe, others went into Asia. From Asia, they either went south into Australia or across what was known as the Bering Land Bridge to North America and eventually to South America. The reason that these people moved the way that they did is that it's believed that they were actually following herds of food. So this time period from about 2.5 million BC to about 8,000 BC is known as the Paleolithic period. If you break that word down, paleo means old, lith means rock. So this is also called the Old Stone Age. During the Paleolithic period, all of the early hominids were nomadic. That is, people that wandered from place to place, usually in search of food. And that's why we believed many of them traveled the way that they did into other continents, was to find this food. They were hunters and gatherers. You had basically two choices. You either were a hunter, and that was usually the males, or the gatherers, people who went out and foraged for berries and nuts, and that was usually the women. Hunters and gatherers had a drawback. That is, they didn't have a steady supply of food. And because they didn't have a steady supply of food, it meant that one, they couldn't settle in one place. They had to follow the herds. And two, they couldn't sustain a large population. If you never know when your next meal is going to come, having a large population to feed is not a wise thing. It meant that people would starve. So they had very small populations. During the Paleolithic age is when you first see the use of fire. And fire was used to cook. It was also used for warmth and to keep away animals. They invented tools, and this is very crude kind of tools, like I said before, digging sticks and so on. And they're known for their cave drawings. Much of what we know about their culture itself actually comes from the remnants that they left behind in these caves. So what was the big turning point? What was the turning point that we no longer live in caves and hunt and gather? And to break it down most simplistically, it was the discovery of agriculture. It's believed that someone may have thrown out seeds and come back the next year to realize that those seeds had grown into plants. And agriculture first showed up in a number of places around the world. This turning point helped begin what is known as the Neolithic period. Neo means new, and again, lith means rock. So this is known as the New Stone Age. So from about 2.5 million to about 10,000 BCE is what they consider to be the Stone Age. And then somewhere between 10,000 and 8,000, you have the development of agriculture. And from about 8,000 to about 3,000 BCE is the time period known as the New Stone Age, or the Neolithic period. The Neolithic period, also known as the Neolithic Revolution and the Agricultural Revolution, was when you see a shift from hunting and gathering to farming. And with this farming, many effects occurred. So the reason that you see the Neolithic or the Agricultural Revolution occur is because the earth itself is changing. There was a change in climate. We're coming out of the ice age. And the world as a whole, the temperature is increasing, even if it's just by a couple of degrees. That meant a longer growing period. Places that were colder and could not grow food previously now can. There was a population boom. More and more people are being born, which means you have more mouths to feed. More mouths to feed means that you have to find a steady source of food. And that steady source of food came from farming. So what effect did the Neolithic Revolution have? Well, first you have what's called slash and burn farming. It was a new kind of technique where they would cut down trees or grass and burn them. What was left behind, the ash, became fertilizer. The problem is, slash and burn farming is not a constant source of fertilizer. So when the nutrients in the soil were diminished, it meant that people had to find a new place to farm. You also have the domestication of animals. Agriculture and domestication of animals go hand in hand because people now are using animals for human use, for things like travel, for use in agriculture, and just as hunting companions like dogs. But now that you have a steady source of food, you see a change, a complete change in the way that people live. You now have the ability to settle. And when you have the ability to settle into actual villages, you get the beginnings of civilization. You have now specialized workers where not everyone has to hunt or gather. They can become scribes, they can develop religions, they can become government officials. They can become artisans. And these are things that people couldn't do before because everyone had to either hunt or gather in order to have enough food. And this population increase and these specialized workers cause people to live together in villages. And eventually villages become cities and cities become civilizations. And that's where we will head to next, some of these early civilizations that occurred due to the Neolithic Revolution. But before that, click here. There's a really cool music video about prehistoric time periods that I think you might like. Yeah, it's a little bit corny, but I like corny. Thanks.